this funeral march from Beethoven, it's the funeral march on the death of a hero, but we don't know who the hero is. It's not like the Eroica funeral march where it famously was, dedicated to Napoleon and that was crossed out. Here it's actually anonymous, so maybe the Henry VI or some kind of other Shakespearean influence could even be connected.
Henry VI, which is part of one of his 2 tetralogies, his historical cycles of 4 plays each that tell about English history. The play opens with the introduction of a casket carried by pallbearers with the dead body of Henry V accompanied to a muffled drum. That's a dead march. Hamlet would really, for me in this case, be the interesting comparison, which occupies a similarly transitional place in Shakespeare's works, and it's an end-of-a-century piece where there are a lot of anxieties about what was known as succession. The question, it's the question of dynastic succession, which king would succeed the aging Elizabeth, but it really has to do with understanding the movement of time in a culture that understands that as governed by the dialectic of the rise and fall of kings.
It's amazing to think that Beethoven in Bonn actually saw Shakespeare plays staged.
Very much. We know that as a boy, Beethoven went to German language productions of Shakespeare in Bonn. We know that he went to King Lear and Macbeth and to versions of Hamlet. Okay. And we know that he owned a very influential edition of German language translation of Shakespeare by August Wilhelm Schlegel.
Why do you think that Shakespeare and Beethoven have been often compared?
One could take that question in many directions, whether it's historically in terms of influence, whether it's conceptually in terms of what they do, or whether it's formally what they do within their own media, within music and literature, in a way to provide modernity with its ground for thinking and feeling about life.
It's amazing that to think about the fact that they could have had such an influence with their works, but it's true that both of them were covering everything in life, really. I mean, comedy, tragedy, history, and so philosophical, and in their use of form.
Yes, and form is crucial. I mean, form thinks, and with the funeral march, for example, Emily Dickinson says, "After great pain, a formal feeling comes." And the funeral march is a very formal, ceremonial thing. It's not haphazard. With respect to the hero, I would say that heroism takes a hit in the 17th century, especially in the later Shakespeare, the Baroque Shakespeare, in the sense that there's a very dark, brooding, melancholic sense that governs the period. And while most of Shakespeare's plays or histories and tragedies are about kings, those figures, those heroes, if you want, that are said to control the movement of time, there is a very sustained darkness about the rise and fall of those kings and their capacity to steer us through time.
Your field of expertise is sovereigns and kings in Shakespeare, but may I reveal a little secret? You're also a pianist, because I've heard you practicing Opus 26 from my living room. In fact, we're neighbors, and we can hear each other's piano playing sometimes.
Well, I wouldn't say pianist. My parents are pianists, and they came to this country, to New York actually, to study with Claudio Arrau. My father was German. He died at 56, like Beethoven, I think. My mother's Chilean. And my father worked for many years with Arrau on the Peters edition of the Beethoven Sonatas. So this music, in a way, constitutes, it's very associated for me with childhood and with my parents.